Hello, I'm Firdaus Karas. I'm a media producer based in Ottawa, Canada. I'm delighted to join you today to talk about the new virus now being called COVID-19. My brief talk today is based on my experiences in dealing with other diseases over the last 25 years. I've worked on HIV/AIDS, on malaria, on obesity in children, on migraines, on polio, on Zika, and many other diseases. The first message I want to give is that history has shown us, going all the way back to the HIV/AIDS crisis, which began some 20 years ago, through more recent examples of the Ebola crisis in West Africa a few years ago, and perhaps to the current Ebola crisis in the Congo, is that we don't pay enough attention to prevention. We are quite good at isolating people. We are quite good at dealing with the symptoms of people, such as fever and colds. We're quite good at putting people into hospital and then giving them the drugs that stop them from dying of a particular disease. We are not, however, very good and experienced at preventing people from getting the disease in the first place. And I think that that is happening once again in this COVID-19 crisis. Once again, we are isolating people. We are checking their temperatures and checking them for other symptoms. We are trying to deal with those that have been infected very efficiently by putting them into hospitals, into isolation units, and giving them the drugs that are necessary. All of that needs to happen, but it needs to happen with a complementary program that is at least as important, if not more important, in stopping people from getting the virus in the first place. And my experience over the last 25 years is that we always seem to come to that conclusion late. The question for me is not whether we would stop the virus without taking preventative measures. We probably will. The question is, can we stop the spread of the virus faster by placing an emphasis on prevention? I think we can. I think we can save some people if we place a huge emphasis on prevention rather than simply dealing with people when they are sick, even though, of course, we need to do that. So my suggestion throughout the world is for us to pay great attention to prevention, not just where the virus is currently spreading, in particular in China, but in fact in many other places around the world where the virus could spread and become an even greater crisis than it already is. So how do we go about doing this? We need to create clear, concise, readily understood communications that can reach masses of people. First, we need to explain what the virus is. Second, we need to explain what the symptoms are that a person might have. Third, we need to explain how the virus is transmitted. And fourth, perhaps most importantly, we need to explain how to prevent getting the virus. Here's the additional point I want to make. We also need to deal with the various myths that have shown up throughout the world, especially on social media, about what this virus is or isn't, and how it is or is not transmitted. We can't just provide positive information. We actually have to provide negative information in the sense that we negate the various myths that have cropped up throughout the world about this virus. I've been hearing and reading about some pretty bizarre comments about the coronavirus and how it is transmitted. There is a video, for example, on social media that seems to suggest that eating bat soup gives you the virus. There's another one that says that if you have a flu shot, you can't get the coronavirus. And there's a third one that basically says, don't go to Chinese restaurants because your local Chinese restaurant might give you the virus. All of these are total nonsense. And the reason that they're spreading so fast across the internet is because there is an absence of accurate information that people can watch. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Some years ago, I created a program on malaria prevention called Buzz and Bite. The Buzz and Bite program consists of 30 animated shorts that currently exist in 39 different languages. They have been used in over half the countries that have malaria. About 106 countries around the world experience malaria. I not only dealt with how malaria is transmitted, but I dealt also with how malaria is not transmitted. For example, there's an animated short that says you can't get bitten by those particular mosquitoes and contract malaria during the day because those mosquitoes only bite at night. There's another spot that says you can't get malaria through the weather. Obviously, in many countries, there are more mosquitoes during the rainy season and therefore more malaria during the rainy season than during the dry season. So people came to the conclusion, in some cases, that malaria is caused by the weather. Those are the kinds of myths we now have to deal with this virus. The social media is already full of these kinds of myths that are going around that are destructive, that don't help those people that need clear, precise, and accurate information about the virus and how it is transmitted. I think we need to be proactive, and I think we actually need to tackle these myths head on. So how do we create these communications? Firstly, we must understand that this is a global problem. This is not just a Chinese problem. This is now a global problem. So we have to be able to deal with the various boundaries and cultures and languages that separate human beings. Secondly, we have to understand that this is behavior change communications. What we're trying to do is get people to change their behavior to prevent getting a particular virus. That is quite difficult to do in many cases, especially in countries that may be far removed from the virus currently, but it is the best way to prevent the virus from spreading any further. So how do we create these communications that get across the various boundaries and barriers that we have as human beings? We need to be able to create communications that is readily understood by people across the world in various cultures and various geographies. What we need to do is have people look at the media and then internalize the information that we are giving them, and then come to their own conclusion to change their own behavior. What is the best method for doing this? Over the years, I have observed that the international community has relied mainly on print media. The international community, in dealing with this kind of crisis about a virus, will usually create posters and brochures to try and convince people to change their behavior. I don't think in the current environment of international communications that is the best method. I think it is imperative that we create visual communications. And the best way to do that, I have learned over the last 25 years, is to create animation. Animation gives us a huge number of advantages. It gives you what we would call a suspension of your disbelief system. You know what you're seeing is not real when you're watching animation, so you're more accepting of the message. Secondly, it crosses the cultural boundaries that we have as human beings. So, for example, an animated character can speak any language in the world, and you would be accepting of that person's message. A real person might create a different environment in your brain, a different realization that that person is not actually speaking your language, and that in fact this is a dubbed version of what was created. So, animation is, in my opinion, the best way to deal on a rapid basis with this virus and with other health emergencies that may emerge in the future. The communications that I would suggest we create to deal with the COVID-19 virus should not threaten people. It should not try to coerce people into changing their behavior. We have to provide information and then nudge people towards changing their behavior in such a way that they come to their own conclusion that they need to change their behavior. How do we do this? We create cognitive dissonance in a person's mind. Cognitive dissonance is simply a different way of looking at something or thinking about something. It's when you have two conflicting ideas in your mind and you pick one of the two conflicting ideas. So, what we need to do is talk about this virus in such a way that it creates cognitive dissonance in the viewer's mind, and the viewer therefore comes to their own conclusion to pick the right approach, the right way to change their behavior, and therefore not get infected by the virus. I hope that the international community and governments around the world don't wait for this to become a bigger crisis than it already is. I hope that we are proactive, that we create the communications right away, and that we get it out across the world. We can't wait. We can't just deal with people who are sick. We need to stop people from getting the virus in the first place. Thank you for taking the time to watch me today.